Univa is the sponsor for this episode of the New Stack Makers. Check out this new Project Tortuga. Univa just open sourced Project Tortuga. It's available under an Apache 2.0 license. It's really a general purpose cluster and cloud management framework. Provides that on-ramp to the cloud for high performance computing workloads, those HPC workloads. You can learn more about Project Tortuga. Go to GitHub, and if you look for the Univa Corporation, you'll see it there, Tortuga. You can learn more about Univa at univa.com. Just a reminder that the New Stack does a lot of events during the year, and sometimes we serve pancakes and record a podcast, maybe do a live stream. So just a rundown of where we'll be and where you can find us. Come say hello. We always love talking to people who listen to our podcast, read the site, so come on by. We will be at the Cloud Foundry Summit in Boston, Massachusetts later this month. April 16th is when the fun begins, followed by KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con in Copenhagen. That's April 30th. That's at least when we're arriving, and I know it goes into that week. Of course it does. May 2nd through 4th, we have the KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con show. Then it's off to Chicago for ChefConf. Also that week is the OpenStack Summit. Lots coming up. Come on by and say hey. We always love to hear a story, share a conversation. Thanks so much to all our sponsors who make the New Stack possible. We love our work. We love what we do. Reach out to us anytime. Talk to you soon. Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack here for an episode of the New Stack Makers. I'm here with Rob Lalonde. Hey, Rob.
Hey, how are you, Alex?
Good. How are
Good to see you.
So we're here at the Open Source Leadership Summit, and you guys have some news coming up in a few weeks, and we thought we would talk about it here to discuss it. It's called Project Tortuga. It's an open source project. Tell us about what Project Tortuga is and the technology behind it and what it means for you guys.
Yeah, so Tortuga, while it applies more directly to our HPC base, does have some relevance for the cloud native community, and we'll bring that back in the discussion to
Sure.
What does it mean for cloud native and specifically for Kubernetes. But I guess first off, Tortuga is a new project that we've been working on for a number of years. We were actually very early to the cloud game in the HPC space. I think we spun up the first HPC clusters on Amazon back in 2008, 2009. And the market has slowly evolved to the point where now we're seeing a lot of interest in hybrid cloud and cloud bursting and also spinning up independent HPC clouds. So what we've decided to do is take that technology, which was formerly called UniCloud. We are open sourcing it under the project name Tortuga, and then we have a commercial product downstream called Navops Launch. So it's part of the Navops line. So a little bit confusing with both Tortuga and Navops Launch, but that's how they fit together.
So why did you choose the name of a Caribbean island? Or
it has to do with some history of some other projects that were related to it, but we have a cool turtle logo coming out, and the industry likes turtles.
Nice.
It explains it entirely, pretty much.
And I wanted to just ask you one question that relates to what you're saying about bursting. How do you guys think about bursting? What is bursting in your guys' view?
So bursting is taking your generally on-premise cluster,
right,
and taking the peaks off that cluster,
right,
as you're not necessarily provisioned or don't need to provision for your peak utilization anymore. You can provision for somewhere just above the average, and then all those peaks of utilization you can burst to the cloud. That way you save money. You don't have it all sitting on-premise, underutilized all the time, and that's bursting in our mind. It's bursting to the cloud to meet those peak utilization needs.
So in that context, then, what is Project Tortuga? Is it a general purpose cluster and cloud framework? I was reading a little bit about that. Does that encompass it? Tell us a little bit how this bursting actually would be done technologically.
Yeah, Tortuga provides a provisioning capability so that you could take your on-premise cluster, spin up those nodes in the cloud, and get the cloud instances that you would need. So what it does is it actually provisions the node. You can bring your own AMI, for instance, if you're using Amazon, so you get your own stack on those cloud nodes that meet the needs of the on-premise cluster. So it configures it, it supports multi-cloud, it supports cloud bursting, and it supports, if you want to burst to multi-cloud, you can do that too. So you could spin up in Amazon, also spin up in Azure at the same time. So it gives you a lot of capabilities. On top of that, it's got a policy engine, so it knows when the on-premise cluster is getting too busy, and it can automatically, based on those policies, give you those instances in the cloud while you need them. And then when the on-premise cluster starts to get less busy, it'll turn those nodes off automatically. So it's very much like composable infrastructure in that sense, because once the administrators have set it up, the cloud nodes can come and go as they're required by the overall cluster utilization.
So you're automating the deployment in many ways.
Correct.
So when you automate the deployment of these clusters, they can be automatically deployed in a multi-cloud environment?
Absolutely, yeah. If that's what your needs are, you can deploy. So we support all the major cloud providers. We support Amazon, Azure, Oracle, Google. We actually support on-premise private clouds as well, like OpenStack and VMware. So you could be using various combinations of those. We have customers that have an on-premise cluster. They burst to their OpenStack cluster locally, and then they can also burst to Amazon at the same time.
So tell us about the underlying technology that is Project Tortuga. What is it that it comes out of Navops that is being open source? What is that technology itself?
Yeah, it comes out of Univa, and it's been brought into the Navops product line.
Okay.
Exactly. Right. But yeah, that technology gives you all of the infrastructure. So it's got cloud adapters, so it knows how to connect to that cloud through the cloud APIs to spin up the nodes. So we're saying turn on a node, turn off a node, those types of things. But also the provisioning capabilities and the configuration management. So we actually have Puppet open source under the covers as well in this product, and it does a lot of the provisioning capabilities that I'm talking about. But Navops Launch provides the wrapping, provides the policy capabilities, it provides the adapters, and then it uses Puppet to do the provisioning of the nodes themselves. So those nodes can be provisioned, as I said earlier, to meet the needs of the customer, so they're not standard nodes. They can be very customized. You can bring your own AMI or whatever your stack is and spin up those nodes.
Oh, okay. So tell us a little bit more about the, the interest from the HPC community in particular.
Yeah, we're seeing just a ton of interest in going to cloud now. So those organizations are seeing top-down pressures or pressures from their customer base internally saying, we need more capacity. And rather than spending money on internal infrastructure like we're seeing the general industry trend, they're looking to burst to the cloud. So the numbers 2-3 years ago was just a few customers doing this. Back in 2009, we were kind of on our own with this technology, and it took a long time for the market to get to where it is now. But we just did a survey recently of our customer base, and a full 60% are somewhere between evaluating to deployed in the status. So the 60% of people are either going to cloud or planning to go to cloud or have already gone to cloud within our customer base. So that's a pretty significant stat and a dramatic shift from 5 years ago.
How do you see it being a general purpose environment, Tortuga? It seems like it has, you guys have roots in the HPC community. How do you see this as a general purpose technology?
Yeah, that's part of the reason for open sourcing,
right,
so other people can adapt it for other purposes. So you're right, it was originally built for the HPC community, and some of those policy hooks, knowing when the Grid Engine on-premise cluster is getting too busy and spinning up the instances in the cloud, that relates to Grid Engine and HPC customers. But other than that piece that sort of integrates with Grid Engine, the rest is very generic. So if you wanted to spin up a Kubernetes, say an OpenShift cluster on-premise, and you need some additional nodes in an Amazon context, you can do that with Navops Launch. And we've actually done that in the past. We have extended Kubernetes clusters using Navops Launch. So it is a generic technology, to your question.
And is that the reason for open sourcing it then? Because you want to make it a generic technology?
Yeah, we want it more broadly adopted. We want to support the community. We want the community getting involved in the product. There's other cloud adapters we could build, and maybe community members want to do that for another cloud provider other than the ones we support now. They might want to support a different provisioning tool. They could do that. They might want to adapt it to work with a different cluster manager, whether that's Kubernetes or some other HPC solution. The world is their oyster once they have the source code.
Would you broadly describe it as a resource manager? Would you take it to that?
Probably not. I consider Grid Engine more the resource manager, because Grid Engine is looking at the workloads, putting them in the right places, I would consider Navops Launch more the cloud provisioning.
Okay, great.
And cluster management solution.
Great. So we've talked to you several times, and we've written about what you guys are doing, and so that I think sets the framework, right? We have the grid engine resource manager essentially, and with Project Tortuga, this is kind of the ability to create, to actually to offer frameworks, right? That to provide this automatic deployment of clusters, right?
Right.
And now, there's been an HPC story there, but you see this as applying to the general community, and thus open sourcing it as a result.
Absolutely. We've seen a lot of the Kubernetes deployments happening on premise to date, particularly with the big companies, right? There's lots of people using GKE and other cloud-based instances of Kubernetes, but we're seeing a lot of it happen on premise, particularly with things like OpenShift. Those customers all have an eye to bursting to the cloud, and Navops Launch is just a great way to monitor what's going on that on-premise OpenShift cluster, determine that some additional instances are needed for some peak in the workloads that are happening, and automatically go out and get those instances, hook it up to the local Kubernetes cluster, and the workload will just automatically start getting distributed by Kubernetes. So Kubernetes won't even necessarily know that there's different instances in another place. It's just all part of the same cluster. Just like with HPC right now, Grid Engine doesn't necessarily know that it's putting workloads into the cloud. That's pretty transparent at that point.
Now, you were talking a little bit about what Tortuga is, and one of the things that comes out is you talk about the capability for it to help the user with policies, right? Tell us about that policy engine a little bit. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that's the cool part that just makes it all kind of sing, right? Because it's very hands-off. Once the administrators have set it up, the end users who are submitting their workloads, it could be scientists in a large life sciences company, they're submitting their workloads. They don't know whether those workloads are going on-prem or to the cloud, nor do they really care for the most part. So the policy engine is what determines when to add those additional instances based on usually the cluster getting busy, queues filling up, those types of things. But it can also adapt the policies so that certain types of workloads may not be allowed to go to the cloud. So we want to be very cognizant of what can run in the cloud, what cannot, what type of instances they're going to run. Are they GPU workloads that need to run in this cloud provider and not on-premise because they can't? All those types of things. So that's what the policy engine does. The policy engine kind of oversees all the different rules around when to spin up instances, what workloads can go to those instances, and those types of things.
Has that been a policy engine that has been, what's the genesis of that policy engine?
It's just all part of Project Tortuga, so it's fully available, it's part of the product.
And did it originate, what reasons did it originate in the first place for you guys?
Really to provide the automation around the solution, right? So we can provision nodes in the cloud, we can provide the stack for that, but you really need automation to determine when those instances are going to be provisioned. So when is a cluster busy on premise, and how and when do we put those nodes up in the cloud, and when do we shut them down too? Shutting them down is really important. People spend way too much money on the cloud because they forgot to turn it off. And this really automates all that. So those instances in the cloud get turned off when they're not in use.
So this must help then perform some workflow operations as well.
Absolutely.
So can you talk about the workflow operations that provide then that framework to really be a platform for launching applications in these multiple cloud environments?
Yeah, I guess the best way to describe it is by way of example. You can imagine if an on-premise cluster is getting busy and you're not using a solution like this, the administrator is going to have to go up, spin up some instances in the cloud, attach that to the cluster, set up the networking, all those kinds of things, and maybe upload some of the images, and there's a lot of work involved in that. With Tortuga, or the commercial product Navops Launch, that's all automated. So the administrator doesn't have to do that. So the workflow is, cluster gets busy, automatically spin up some instances in the cloud, make sure that the right instances for that type of work so that they're sized accordingly, so that they have GPUs if needed, those types of things.
So it could be VMs, could be GPUs, could be containers.
Could be anything, yep. And then extend that cluster automatically, whether it's telling Kubernetes, hey, you've got some new nodes here.
And that's when it's monitoring the peaks.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. That's what's monitoring the peaks. That's what's determining what types of workloads can go to the cloud and what types of instances you need in the cloud. So all of this workflow happens automatically.
Okay. So the workflow all happens automatically, and then
then the user can deploy applications against that.
Right on. They're going to submit their workloads, whether they're a Kubernetes user or they're a grid engine user in the HPC context. They submit their work. Whether they know it's going into the cloud or not really is just a matter of how you handle your administration of that cluster, but they don't necessarily need to know that. They might just say, I need some GPU nodes. Here's my work. Off it goes.
So this will be then really the genesis for what you guys are calling Navops launch.
Right.
And that will be the commercial version of Project Tortuga.
Right. So we probably have 15, 20 customers now running Navops launch commercially on-premise. That's our supported offering. That's the downstream offering for us to offer to our enterprise customers, but certainly those same customers or new customers or maybe an academic that just wants to work with the open source, they can take Project Tortuga. All the instructions are there. They can deploy this on their own.
And Navops launch will be available.
Navops launch is available now.
But with Project Tortuga.
Project Tortuga will be available. Well, by the time we show this video, it'll be available on GitHub.
Great. Well, Rob, thank you so much for taking the time to talk here at the Open Source Leadership Summit about the technology itself.
We're really excited about it. Thanks for having us.
Great.
All right, that's another episode of the New Stack Makers. Univa is the sponsor for this episode of the New Stack Makers. Listen to more episodes of the New Stack Makers at thenewstack.io/podcast. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.